Why did you make the decision to move back to Taiwan?
Well, my parents came back to retire about maybe 10 years ago, and they eventually got older, and then my mom was in and out of the hospital, and then I think what really was the turning point was when my father got dementia, and he needed a lot of care. And then my mom also had been declining so much that it was clear that she wasn't able to make a lot of the decisions. And my relatives who had been helping with my parents were also getting older, and they had their own, things to take care of, plus health issues and all that. So it just became very clear that they needed more help, and it was good to be closer to them.
I just was wondering because I feel like in Asian cultures that is a thing that people do. Your parents get older, and it's kind of an obligation sort of way that the children come and take care of them, however it is that they have to do it. So you were in the States, and you had to make a decision to come back. And what was the process like?
I think it was sort of a gradual process. My parents, I was born and raised in the U.S., and we didn't grow up surrounded by a lot of Taiwanese culture, even though we had a lot of relatives and extended family. But I think my parents were always very independent. So even growing up, they never even hinted at the fact that eventually we would need to take care of them. I mean, they gave us a lot of freedom, which I'm very grateful for. And I think it was always in the back of my mind that eventually I would want to help them in their older age. But you don't plan for these things.
Yeah.
You don't think about your parents ever getting old or becoming vulnerable or getting sick. I mean, nobody ever plans for that. Nobody ever plans for illness and aging.
Yeah.
So in some ways, you think about it every now and then. It's in the back of your mind, but ultimately, and you just hope. I mean, I'm a Christian, so I pray that God will show me in the right moment that when I'm needed to be around or to be closer to them. And there were many times when my parents had come back to retire, my brother and I started visiting, of course, more. And I would say the last 5 years, when I visited, it was then that it became harder and harder to leave, because you saw them declining and becoming more vulnerable, and then it was so painful to leave them. And even then, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know at what point is the right moment. And of course, and especially for me, I have nothing here in Taiwan.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody. I have a few extended family that I barely know. So for me, it was sort of like it better be very clear.
The message needs to be really
The message has to be very
Yeah.
clear and obvious. There was this one year that the dengue epidemic was pretty bad. They both lived in Tainan in the south. And she happened to get it, and she was in the hospital for a really long time. And thankfully she recovered, but it put her body in a very kind of messed up state. And then since then she had like a hypertensive crisis, and then she like fell and broke her arm. I mean, it's one thing after another. A few years after the dengue, she had a hypertensive stroke. And then at that point, my dad, with the help of my aunt, they hired a foreign caregiver because she wasn't really able to get around much by herself. And my brother and I had visited that year, and it's hard because you also when you're not when you're not with, they're far away, you don't see them on a regular basis. So you see them in whatever, the 1 or 2 weeks that you're visiting. But that only tells you a piece of the story.
Yeah.
And then after that, we would be on video calls, but video calls don't really tell you that much of the reality. And of course, your parents never, they try to put on a good face and everything's fine. And they're used to being independent. So it took a while to really see clearly what was really needed. And of course, sort of peeling back the layers too of what is it that they're able to do and not able to do. And then it really wasn't until I moved here that I realized, oh my gosh, there was so much that my parents went through, especially my mom when she was sick. Like I just never imagined, and they don't tell you the details. They just kind of overlook it. So, that I learned a lot from that, I think. And
so, you came back and you said that you have a brother. So was there a decision between the two of you that it was going to be you that moved back? Because you had a job as well, right? So, well, how did that come about?
I don't think we really discussed it. I think just growing up, I've always felt a little bit more responsible.
Okay. Is he younger than you?
He's older.
He's older than you.
I think just temperament-wise and his personality.
But generally, like, I feel like in Asian cultures, it's the older son that takes more of the that takes more of the responsibility. But in the U.S. too.
Before my parents moved here, my parents actually moved to at that time. So my brother was living in the suburbs of Seattle, near Kirkland, and my parents had decided we want to be closer to our children, and so they moved to, because they were in California, Southern California. I was on the East Coast, so they moved to Seattle, to another suburb, and to be closer to my brother and his family. Him being the oldest, but then. I think boys are boys. Like they're not like daughters, And so, of course, he was willing to do anything for my parents, but my parents had to ask him. He wasn't. He didn't know what to do unless they asked or unless you tell him.
Right.
I think that's kind of. I shouldn't generalize, especially in this day and age. People will be like, "What? You're being." But that's been my experience, is that a lot of times, the guys don't always know necessarily what to do. And then one day, I remember the phone call that I got from my parents or from my mom. She's like, she just told my brother and I, oh, we're gonna move to Taiwan in like a month or two. And we were both like, what?
Wow.
How did that decision come to be? And but in hindsight, I think, and what prompted them was just the medical care. I mean, they were on Medicare.
Back in the States.
And it just, I think the medical system, there's just so much paperwork and there's so much, you've got to have the Medicare plus the supplementary insurance and there's just so much. And I think for immigrants, for my parents who they moved there in their mid-30s. It's, I don't know, but for them it was just
complicated.
It was complicated.
Yeah.
And my mom needed a lot of dental work, which wasn't covered by the insurance, and they still had Taiwan nationality. So I think originally they were just going to come to Taiwan and get the dental work.
Right.
I think my dad, I think he saw the writing on the wall, like, oh, this is not gonna be a simple thing. So somehow they just decided they were gonna stay. And healthcare is so much cheaper here. I mean, there's just no comparison.
Yeah.
And in hindsight, I think if the trajectory of their health had come to a point where it is now, I think it would have been, I don't know how my brother and I would have been able to afford healthcare
back in the States.
in the States
Yeah.
because they're both in a very nice care home,
Mm-hmm.
and I think also the culture of caring for the elderly here
Mm-hmm.
is very different.
Mm-hmm.
So I do feel like it's a good place for them, even though it's unfortunate that it has to be so far. And
Yeah.
but for their sake, I mean, I think for them, it's nice for them to be in a place where they grew up. I mean, it's familiar, even though they'd been away for a long time.
Yeah.
But I think as you age, you kind of revert back to the things that are most familiar to you in your youth, and adjustment for them is less of an issue than it would be for someone who's never lived in Taiwan.
Yeah, exactly. Like you. So you made the decision that as the daughter, it's more, maybe
It could be
not
cultural.
always, but it's culturally significant that the daughter does it in Asia, maybe. But that's weird because usually the older son expected to take care. Because in my family, in terms of obligations for certain things, my brother, who's the older brother, was expected to take care of a lot of things.
Yes.
But
No, you're right.
Yeah. But because he also lived abroad, then it ended up to be my sisters that had to take care of the things, issues and things that happen, and mostly them taking care of it. So
yeah, I think like the older brother, the oldest will, I think culturally in Asian cultures, kind of are like the head of the household. And they're kind of looked upon as that, which I think my brother is. I'm talking more about, having the eye to know, like to be able to sense like, okay, my mom needs my parents need accompaniment, not just financial,
Right.
and not just the logistical things.
Yeah.
But there is the kind of care that you give somebody who you can see is vulnerable now. And I think women just tend to be better at that.
Yes,
Like
I agree with
recognizing
that.
those things and recognizing, oh, now that she's handicapped, there's a lot of things that she's not able to do for herself. A lot of her freedom is taken away, and who's gonna help her with that?
Yeah.
I think we have more empathy in some ways,
Yes.
and we can kind of,
In a lot of ways, I think women tend to generally have more empathy
Yeah.
than men do. But yeah, so then when you made the decision then that it was you that was going to come and do it, how long did it take? Like a month, 2 months for you to prepare and...
well, I didn't really have time.
things-
Yeah, I didn't have
you
time
didn't
for it because my dad was in the hospital.
Okay.
And so he was, and this is what I mean about, like, this would never happen in the U.S., I don't think. He had a urinary tract infection, he had pneumonia. It was then that they diagnosed him with dementia because he had not been eating.
Wow.
And was very frail. Through just communication with my relatives and with my mom, it became clear, like, he couldn't go back home. So then it was, so I need to come to Taiwan and then assess the situation. And I had a feeling at that point that, because I had come to see my dad because he had surgery, he had hernia repair, and he was already very frail then. So I just knew like it was just a matter of a short time where I knew I would have to make a decision, but I just didn't know when that time was. So when he was hospitalized this last time, so this was in 2022, we were able to communicate to the doctor that, can he stay there until I come? Which it took a couple of months because I needed to get all this kind of my own situation settled so I could come for an extended period of time, potentially, if I needed to. And so, I mean, the hospital just was able to wait for me. It was almost like 8 weeks.
Oh, 8 weeks that he was... Oh,
in
wow.
the hospital. Yeah. I mean, I think he wasn't ready to be discharged until, 4 to 6 weeks. He really was, he needed to be there for that long. But then they kind of extended it
out a little bit, yeah.
waiting for me to come. And then when I came, I was just really impressed with the nurses, and the doctor was just so, like they were just so understanding and so nice about my dad being there. And then I felt like I could take as much time as I needed to find a care home. In the U.S. you'd be like, it's all about, the bed and the money and
efficiency.
the insurance will be on, the insurance company would be on your case to get you out of the hospital. And but I felt like I had that time to look for a good place, and I had some family help me, and that would never happen in the U.S.
Yeah. So how did you find the place?
The hospital gave me like a list of 100 places, and I was like, where do I begin? What really helped was the caregiver of my dad in the hospital. They are just caregivers.
Okay.
But they're in-house. They're in the hospital.
Okay.
They're not foreign caregivers. They're part of the hospital.
Right.
And so you can hire them to take care of the patient. And they take care of more than one. But so they see a lot of people coming in from the different care homes in that area, from the community. So they can tell which ones are well taken care of and who is not well taken care of. So she actually, this caregiver, gave me a name of a place that she, had heard, because there's like a net, they hear through the grapevine which care homes have a bed. And then she told me, why don't you try this place, because the people who come from there are usually well cared for, and they're clean, and they're no bed sores, and I think they have extra beds there. Why don't you call? So we called, and sure enough, they had a bed, and we were able to visit that same day. And we went, and then we liked it, and it was a good price, and we were able to secure the spot, and he was transferred in a couple days. So that was how that worked out really.
Yeah, smoother than you thought, maybe.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I feel like things tend to happen for certain reasons at certain times, and either for the better or worse, but the way it's supposed to happen.
That was, at that point I realized, well, when you have them in a care home, you really need to be, you can't be like, was it with 14 hours time difference away and distance wise, because they need to be able to reach you, and my mom wasn't going to be able to answer a lot of those questions, and so that at that point, when on that trip, I realized like, oh, they need somebody here,
right?
So that's kind of what was very clear. So I went back and gave my notice, and then packed up. It took me like 2 or 3 months.